All right. Might as well do death. That's always fun. So what do we know about humans and death? Death is a hard thing to deal with. And so we have a number of ways. Well, for one thing, one of the things that's interesting about humans is, yeah, we sometimes have a hard time dealing with this, but humans also, their textbook tells us, we place a lot of meaning on the ways that our remains get treated. And so, in terms of death, we engage a lot, or we have things that try to help us through these times. What are called rituals. So, rituals are these events that mark and guide you through a life transition like being born, becoming a grown up, getting baptized, or dying. And in some ways, dying is one of those ultimate things because it's difficult to understand or deal with for human beings. And so we have a lot of rituals in various societies, our own and others, which enable us to guide us through this process. Notice this when my father-in-law passed away 2 years ago. We went through all the Catholic ceremonies. You do these basically three large Catholic ceremonies in a row, and then you have a bunch more as you go along. I came from more of a Protestant tradition, and so I wasn't used to all these masses and rituals going on. But I have to say, the Catholics have been doing this for a long time, and they get you through this in a way. They make sure all these stages are comprehended in a series of rituals that guide people through this time of their life. So, our first question, though, is what are the elephants doing there? Well, the question in your textbook is when did humans first comprehend death? Which is completely unanswerable because how can we know when humans first comprehended death? But we can turn to the elephants for answers. Why? Nobody found this relatable, the poor elephants. What do elephants do? Yes, they attend to the dead bodies. They gather around. They seem to have some comprehension and even memory of what's going on. So we don't know when humans first comprehended death, but there seems to be in other species something of a comprehension of what's going on. Archaeologically, in terms of what we can tell from the archaeological evidence. So you can't tell when people first comprehended death. That's impossible to know. You don't know what they were thinking back then. But archaeologically, when we see some arrangement of burying, maybe even grave stuff placed in a grave, the Neanderthals again seem to provide our first archaeological evidence. That doesn't mean they were the first. It just means that's the first ones we have archaeological evidence for. For humans, we get some archaeological evidence around 30,000 years ago. And there's some debate about the intentionality of the Neanderthal evidence. It's not completely clear, but with the humans, you can see burials with intentional rituals and stuff being put together to guide people into the afterlife or some form of the idea that you can see that people are preparing for something else. Now, again, this doesn't mean death isn't an ultimate demise. For all I know, it is an ultimate demise. But what this means is that many human groups believe that it is not the final part of your life, that you have another part of life, either collectively or individually, after passing away. Archaeologically, we see this 30,000 years ago, where you can find stuff and find something like individual graves. In terms of cemeteries, those come in at about 15,000 years ago archaeologically, which is in some ways, thinking about this, it's around the time that we start to see more evidence of settled life and not necessarily agriculture, but starting to be more settled communities at around the same time. Again, this probably humans and other other in the hominin lineage, people comprehended death and understood death, and there are probably burials from before this, but this is when we have the archaeological evidence coming in. Ever since then, there's been various ways that people do death. The textbook gives you the example of Hindu rituals of taking people to the Ganges River and some form of cremation in the hope of reincarnation into a better life. A pretty famous example of what goes on in death. And so these are in general called rites of passage. So rituals, rites in the sense R-I-T-E-S, a ritual which marks off a life stage. So birth, coming of age, maybe a 15th birthday party or a 16th birthday party is sometimes when people do these things to mark people coming into different forms of life, getting married, another important rite of passage, or of course, dying. And in most of the time that people do these rites of passage, anthropologists have analyzed these, and what most of them involve are three kinds of phases. One of them is a phase of separation, in which people exit their normal roles of life or start to dress in funny clothes or assemble in a certain place which is outside of their usual places. And then you have a time of what anthropologists call transition or liminality, where people are betwixt or between two different worlds. And in some ways, during the time of liminality or transition, the usual rules get suspended. And so people do weird things, like in a marriage ceremony, they feed each other cake, and they do strange dances, and the usual social relationships are upended. Everybody sleeps together in weird ways. And then you come out and you rejoin society, you're aggregated into society in your new role. You come out as husband and wife or husband and husband, whatever you do in marriage, and then you are re-enter society in your new role. Some of you, maybe not, I don't know. How many of you are seniors right now, graduating soon? Okay. So you're about to go through a mini rite of passage, the ceremony that we call commencement. The separation, of course, is you'll have to put on those funny robes. It's not your usual clothes. You have to get dressed up in those weird robes. Then you go through the liminal phase when you're in between stages. You go up on the actual stage. There might be some liminality around the graduation party when the usual rules of life get suspended. And then you re-enter society as a full-grown adult ready to get a job now because you have a college education and a degree. So we do these things to mark off different parts of our life. Of course, we're here talking about death rites of passage, which hopefully we don't have to go through very soon. So humans are a species, we openly lament or grieve loss. And this is something of a human universal. We see this in all different societies around the world. And so these rituals, like a funeral, which is again a form of a rite of passage, several of you mentioned going to funerals and doing things like sharing food together, guiding you through this process, which helps to manage this loss. There might be some crying or laments. And there are some groups in the world that very much emphasize this grief. Your textbook gives you the example of people who this isn't a common practice anymore, but it was once in the day that you would emphasize your grief by cutting off your own finger part way. But there are other groups who are much more subdued about it around the world, and there's different forms. But we all, in some ways, openly do this grieving for the loss of those we love. In perhaps all societies, but some more explicitly than others, we maintain a connection with people who have passed along. How do people do this? Altars and stuff like that. So there'll be altars or annual festivities. Textbook gives you the example of the King Ming Festival, where it was outlawed for a while, but seems to be coming back, which blends different traditions in order to honor cases. Let's just say honor the ancestors and bring them back into their lives. Perhaps closer to home, maybe because of that popular movie that came out, is the Dia de los Muertos, or the Day of the Dead, which in this country we usually associate with Mexico, but it's actually celebrated through in different places in Latin America, usually around the time that we do Halloween. And the idea of this is you would put out food and different things to establish communication with your deceased ancestors and to honor them. Sometimes they visit you to eat the food, talk to you. What was that movie called? Many of us saw it, but now I'm forgetting the name of it. Pixar. No. Oh well. I'll get it for you. A little bit later on in the chapter, they talk about an interesting section they call Between Life and Death, which is to say that now that we have organ donation and different medical technologies that can perhaps extend life even beyond where people wanted to go, keep people alive in different ways, it ends up being complicated when you define death. What do you discover about the timing of death? Yeah, so it's important to realize as we look around the world and within our own society as well, that when people, bless you, are said to have died or how this happens is socially variable. So some people might talk about, oh, they're brain dead, but other people are like, well, that's not a thing. That's not when people die. So there's a lot of different ethical complications around this. You made an eloquent case for people like me should go away quietly. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I'm making fun of you, but yeah, the line between some people believe that the counter argument, of course, is that oh no, people are then they're going to euthanize people, the old people, but yes, I do actually agree with you that being able to have your control over your own lifespan and when that happens is quite important to people. So that is in some ways coming in, perhaps more in our own society. People are more accepting of, say, hospice care and decisions about when they will be able to end their life. But yeah, people have gotten into huge legal fights about whether someone should be allowed to die or not. It's still an issue in our society. All right, questions about dying. At least Sophie, the rest look kind of mortified.